Hi everybody, welcome back. My name is Jason Osborne. I'm a culinary and baking and pastry instructor here at Charlotte Technical College. Today we're going to be working with the students on enriched yeast bread. So we're going to be creating cinnamon rolls from scratch, okay? This is one of the important techniques that the students are going to have to learn throughout the year. This is a process that these young students will have to more than likely attempt more than one time. Every single time you do it, we tend to get a little bit better. The cinnamon rolls become a little bit more uniform in shape and weight, and that's what we're looking. Every single time the students create this recipe, they get a little bit better each and every time, okay? And we give them unlimited opportunities to do so, all right? So today we're going to go ahead and show, this is actually a demo for the students to see how this process works, okay? And that's how we like to do it here in this particular school, is I like to have an instructor-led demo, and then we will have guided practice, and then we will have independent work, and then the icing on the cake per se will be for my students to be able to teach other students how to do all of these different assignments throughout the entire course of the program, okay? So instructor, demo, guided practice, independent practice, and then we want them to be able to teach somebody else how to do it. That's how I know I've done my job and that the students are really grasping what it is that we're requiring to do. You have a pastry brush? So butter. Don't be shy. Okay?
Girl.
This recipe is going to call for
more careful than that.
what, 8 ounces of butter? 4 ounces, okay, for a quarter recipe. So don't be shy with it, okay? We want a nice even coating in there.
What happened?
Try not to let it run off the edge. Okay. Now, if you guys want, you could put, rehydrated raisins. You could put caramelized apples inside of here. You could put toasted pecans, walnuts, all three. Okay, you can get creative with your filling to a certain extent. Okay. Don't be shy. It's a cinnamon roll. Lots of cinnamon, lots of sugar. Okay? All right. So here's the deal. You want to keep this line straight. We want to keep your edges as straight as you can. All right? We want it to be uniform. Okay? We don't want it to look like a snake that just ate a rabbit. All right? So you want to try to keep it as uniform as you can from this stage. So, after you've got a couple turns, you want to kind of draw that back, pull it back snug, okay? Not too tight, but it needs to be snug, because what you'll have is you'll have pockets of air, all right, that will give you a funky shape after it's baked, okay? Again, we want these, if we can keep this square at the edges, that's what we want to see, okay? If when you're rolling this up you have an excess of bench flour, okay, you should get a pastry brush and brush that excess flour off of there, okay? So you guys, students tend to use a little bit too much bench flour because it's easier. It keeps it from sticking. However, it doesn't taste good when it's rolled into the cinnamon roll, okay? So again, we want to work on those ends. Okay. Come on over here, guys. Come closer, guys. Here. So, it's pretty even, okay? You know, when I was a student here, my instructor showed me when we would make a batch of cinnamon rolls, it would go out onto the table and it would cover this whole table. And you would roll it so that the excess went over the table. And then we would cut it, or we would butter it, cinnamon and sugar it, and then we would cut the excess around the outside of the table so you had a perfect rectangle. But it would make 100 cinnamon rolls. It was too many, all right? Okay, so it's pretty even. Now you have to cut, all right? Can you hand me the chef knife? Thank you. Thank you. So what we'll do is you're gonna go about this size, okay? Okay, nice tight spiral. And an extra. Okay, so you know, this is one of those things. Now, if you were to make a pecan sticky bun per se, you could take, and that would be, you would take a muffin pan, and it would have caramelized sugar and pecans and butter on the bottom of the muffin pan, and you would take that cinnamon roll and put it on top of inside of the muffin tin, proof it, bake it, flip it out, and you would have that caramely, like pecan, you know, sweet glaze on top of it. Like I said, the filling that could go inside of there is, you know, it's pretty, it leaves itself to a lot of different opportunities for, you know, changing of the season and different flavors. So that's kind of the basic technique. And now what will happen is these are going to be proofed in the oven until they double in size, or proofed in the proof box until they're doubled in size. And then we will bake them off 350 degrees, okay? The one thing that you have to remember is that they have a lot of sugar in them, so they're going to get brown really fast in the oven. So we have to watch the time and the temperature when we bake them off. Okay. All right, guys. So the next enriched yeast bread that we're going to be looking at today is going to be brioche. This is another technique that we like to perfect in the baking and pastry program. It's a very rich dough, and it is so versatile. We can make donuts, cinnamon rolls, savory Kaiser rolls, sweet products. It's just a great technique for these guys to learn how to perfect when they're here in this program. Okay. This particular dough is made with the sponge method or the two-stage mixing method because of the high amount of fat and sugar that's in the recipe. So as you saw when we were making the dough from the beginning, that we have to activate the yeast, we have to create that sponge, and then we can start the mixing process. All right. Another important step in the brioche making process is that we develop the gluten before we add the fat. All right, so the fat is actually referred to as shortening as far as bake shop ingredients go, and shortening is named shortening because it shortens gluten strands. Okay, so in a high fat dough like this, we develop the gluten and then we add the fat at the end. All right. And that's what we have here. Again, this particular dough has been retarded overnight. Lower temperature, longer fermentation develops a better flavor, but it also makes the shaping process easier. So we make the dough and we refrigerate it overnight. It still proofs, the yeast is still active in there, still developing great flavor, but it's this step here makes the shaping process a lot easier, especially when we're making knots and different shapes like that. All right, so today we're going to be doing a loaf, a brioche loaf. Okay, we're doing a brioche loaf for our pork belly tapas on Thursday night. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to portion this out into a 14-ounce ball. All right, 14-ounce round. That way all of our bread proofs and bakes at the same time and temperature. And what we'll do is we'll just do a gentle rounding. Let that rest for a second. Go ahead and punch out all of our rounds. So, there's a lot of different ways to make pan bread. All right, you know, different doughs require a little bit different shaping, per se. So with this particular one, since it's chilled, it makes it quite a bit easier. But we want to have this is going to be our width. Okay, so 14 ounces tends to be a pretty good amount when it comes to making a loaf. Okay, so what we'll do is we'll just kind of roll this a little bit. Okay, and actually this is the process that we would take when we make like cinnamon bread, right? So we would be very similar to a cinnamon roll, only in a loaf form. Okay, okay, so when we roll that, it's not gonna, okay? And since it's been, kind of retarded overnight, proofed overnight, and it's a little relaxed, you don't have an awful lot of carbon dioxide built up in the dough. So it's not like we have to, expel any of those gases that are inside of there, because we don't want to have any air pockets. But, chilling the dough tends to really help kind of expel those guys, okay? So you end up with a nice round, and then we pop this guy in here, okay? And what's going to happen is we will egg wash the top, and then we will proof it until it doubles in size, and then we'll bake it off, okay? So this is one of those doughs that the temperature of the kitchen and the temperature of the dough and the temperature of the kitchen really affects the texture of the product when we're working with it. So we're battling heat and humidity on a regular basis, and those are two of the things that really affect the way that the yeast grows. So the bread's never the same in here. Every single day we make a brioche. We'll use the same recipe. The same student can make it over and over and over, and slight variations in the way that the bread comes out. So it's really one of those kind of things where the bread really, it kind of tells you when it's ready. So oftentimes when we're in here and the students are so adamant about following the recipe, and it says 400 degrees for 18 minutes, chef, and that's what I did. And there's so many other factors that go along with how these different baked items react to temperature, humidity, and it's just they really have to think about it. They really have to think about the product. It's so much more than just coming in here and following a recipe and expecting it to come out the same every time when there's so many influences in it. So we really are trying to not only teach these guys how to make products and how to learn techniques and fundamentals, but why is that so important? I don't want to just show them how to do it. I want them to understand why they're doing it and what are some of the different ways that the way that we achieve the same final outcome, because if you make brioche in New York and you make brioche in South Florida, it's not the same. It's different. And really, Jesse, traditionally to make Pullman bread, Pullman loaves, Pullman loaf is a square loaf, and actually if I had Pullman pans, there would be a lid that slid on top, and you would proof that until it filled the pan, and we would bake it with the lid on it. That way when we unmolded it, it would be perfectly square, but this will give you a good idea on what this is gonna look like. All right, so that's brioche, and we're gonna let these guys proof in the oven, and then we'll bake them off, and that'll be it. All right, so the next lesson that we're going to be working on today is going to be making pâte choux, or choux paste, or eclair paste. All right, and this is another very important skill set that I want the students to really understand and really practice and perfect the making of this particular dough, because this particular dough is the backbone of an awful lot of recipes that we can make, that the students can make when they get out there into the industry, okay? Savory applications as well as sweet applications. So all of the different menu items that can be created with eclair paste, profiteroles, churros, croquembouche, cream puffs, eclairs. Savory application would be referred to as a gougere, where we actually take and fold Swiss cheese into the finished mix. And there are a lot of potato dishes also that we use eclair paste for. When we make a Lorette potato, we're actually taking equal parts mashed potato and eclair paste, folding them together, piping them, and frying them to make a really exciting, like fluffy, crunchy, kind of an odd starch that could go with different entrees and different appetizers and things like that, okay? So one of the things that we like to talk about with the students is we really want them to understand the ingredients that they're using and the similarities and the differences between those said ingredients. So in this case, we're using milk and water, we're using shortening and butter, eggs, and flour. Now, when Jesse makes cream puffs, sometimes I say use all butter. Sometimes we use all shortening. Sometimes we use all milk. Sometimes we use all water. And the end result is always different. All right? So I like the students to understand why we use half butter, half shortening, why we use half milk, half water. All right? Those all have an effect on the way that the cream puff comes out in the end. Texture, taste, color, everything. All right? So I'm going to go ahead and have Jesse go ahead and start with the ingredients. So he has, that's half water and half milk. And
8 ounces each.
8 ounces of both of those. And what and why we use both is because if we use all water, we will have a nice crispy cream puff, but it will not necessarily give us any flavor and any caramelization in the oven. Okay? Same way with the shortening. We're using half butter, half shortening. If we were to use all shortening, it would be very crispy, but it would lack flavor and it would lack color. If we were to use all butter, it would have amazing flavor, but we would be fighting against the texture. All right, really, I find that here in Florida, the amount of humidity, if we don't get the dough made correctly, they tend to collapse on us, and some of that is due to the baking, but some of that also is to do with the amount of fat that's in the recipe, and it keeps them from. They have great flavor, but they tend to be a little bit soft. All right, so I was always taught. It's not the only way to do it, but I was always taught that you use half butter, half shortening, half milk, half water. It gives you the best of both worlds. Great flavor, great color, great texture, and the end result is pretty nice cream puff. Okay. So this is one of those stages where a lot of mistakes happen at this stage here. All right. This mixture here, the milk and the water and the butter and the shortening need to come to a simmer, and then the flour needs to go in immediately. If we allow the liquid to reduce, the moisture evaporates, thus creating an imbalance in wet and dry ratio, which will affect the end result of the product. Okay? So you have to kind of pay attention. We don't want to walk away from it necessarily and have it boil and evaporate, because that messes up the ratio, okay? One of those things that you need to think a little bit more deeper into it, especially when it comes to troubleshooting it. This is a step here where you could get a vanilla bean in there. If you wanted to scrape a vanilla bean pod into that liquid right there, that would help flavor it. If you wanted to get a little bit of, if you didn't have a vanilla bean, you could get some vanilla extract, maybe a little sugar. This is a relatively flavorless dough.
Tastes like egg.
It's just not. It's not very. It doesn't have a lot of flavor to it. Kind of like a blank canvas, basically. We really, it leaves us a lot of options as far as what type of filling goes in it. and what type of glaze we put on it. That's where the main flavor is going to come from. So
that just makes it all the more important to master the base recipe, so that then you can go back and just alter anything, the pastry cream, the topping, the garnish, the glaze, and that will basically lead you to endless possibilities. Right now I'm stirring it a lot right now. Usually you'd be able to just let it sit, but I'm stirring it to make sure that everything, all the shortening and all the butter breaks down and melts before it simmers. Because if I just leave it, there's a small chance that it might start simmering before I'm ready for it. Right now I see that there's a lot of steam, so I know that it's going to start simmering in just a minute. So I'm going to have my flour on hand, and what's going to happen is that as soon as I start seeing bubbles and I start seeing it simmer, I'm gonna pour all my flour in at once, and I'm going to whisk it rapidly so that it doesn't burn the sides of the pan and it doesn't burn at all. So once I add all the flour, we're going to mix it together. It's going to come together as a dough, and what we're going to try to do is we're going to try to scrape down the sides as much as we can so that the stuff that doesn't get picked up by the whisk doesn't burn. And we're going to try to get rid of some of the liquid in it. So that's why we keep it in the pan for about a minute or two until it finishes. And it's ready to go in the mixer. So you can see it's starting to bubble and the white's coming up, and now it's really simmering. So I'm gonna add all of it in, and I'm gonna start mixing. And as you can see, it's clumping together very, very well. And I just wanna break up some of the pockets of the flour as well. It's come together very, very well. So I'm just gonna keep on mixing it a little bit, try to get some of the moisture out.
So knock that stuff out of that whisk there. And you know, this is one of the stages here where I tell the students, you know, if we're making this several times, you're making this a couple times, you know, when we're in this pastry elements part of the program, we want to kind of memorize what that's supposed to look like, and realize that if it doesn't look like this at this stage, there's been an error somewhere in the measuring. So, you know, we want that to look like almost like a stiff roux consistency. All right.
Do you think it's time to go ahead and add to the mixer?
Go ahead and remove the whisk and use the spatula.
Okay.
You know, some people like to take and finish it, you know, start to finish with the whisk. I like to kind of get it all to come together and then switch it into a, you know, rubber spatula or a wooden spoon. But the important thing here with this particular technique at this point is that it's still cooking. All right, we're still the starch in the flour is still absorbing moisture. We're still evaporating some of the excess moisture. All right, and you know, that's what we want the dough to look like at this point here. All right. All right, so let's go ahead and we'll switch.
So now what we're going to do is we're going to get it into the mixer as fast as we can, pretty much. So I'm pouring it all in the mixer so it stops cooking. I'll lift it up, and I'm going to start mixing on a low speed. So what we're doing now is we're cooling it down. You might be able to see all the steam coming out of it. We're going to keep mixing it until the steam starts dissipating and there's no more steam. And we can also feel the bottom of the bowl and feel how hot the bottom of the bowl is. So this process will take just like a few minutes possibly, and we just want to get all of the heat out so that The eggs don't cook once we add them because we do not
bake
want the
them off in
eggs
the
to
dish.
cook. And the eggs cook around, I mean, somewhere around 180 degrees. What temperature does the eggs cook at?
Yeah, the eggs are gonna they'll cook at 185 degrees.
Yeah.
So the egg white cooks at a lower temperature than the egg yolk. So we let some of that steam escape out of there, and then we can start to add the eggs 3 at a time. This is really one of the variables with making pâte à choux, is that depending on the size of the recipe, we're looking to memorize a consistency here, okay? We're dealing with different size eggs. We're dealing with different humidity levels in the kitchen. This is a relatively small batch, but if I was making a large batch, we might not add all of the eggs that the recipe calls for, okay? So we're really looking for a consistency. So I tell the students, and in the recipe, we'll tell the students, hold the last egg out. Don't put the last egg in, just in case it's a little bit on the too runny side, okay? We want the batter to be smooth, but not runny. You can go ahead and start adding your thirds.
Really, it's all about doing it multiple times, and you just have to learn from your mistakes. Really, with anything you do in the kitchen. And also, when I add the eggs in there, the eggs are pretty cool, so start warming it down too. So I'm just gonna wait for that to start coming together, and once it comes together, I'll start adding more eggs. And I mean, as I said with the brioche dough, it looks a little bit funky right now, but you have to trust the process. So now it's starting to come back together. So I will be adding a few more eggs. And then we'll just wait again for it to come together. So now it's starting to come back together, so I'll stop it, scrape it down, making sure to get all the sides, and especially right at the very bottom of the bowl where the paddle doesn't necessarily touch the bowl, because that is where a lot of the ingredients start to gather. Especially if you're making something like cookies or cake, you really just want to make sure you get down to the very bottom of the bowl. And that's also why it's important not to overfill your mixer, because it makes it harder to get everything incorporated together evenly. And you just don't want to overmix it too if you're cooking something else. So I'll go ahead and lift it back up again, kick it back on. And it's starting to look pretty good. It's coming together. So I'll pour a few more of the eggs in there, saving just a little bit left so we can see how it looks now.
Yeah, this is one of those stages where, depending on what this looks like at this point, we may just add the last egg white. We may not. We may leave the egg yolk out, depending on if it's too runny. So. Because the eggs in this particular recipe is what generates the leavening in the product, okay? So when this bakes up in a hot oven, the moisture in the eggs and the water and the milk and the butter and the shortening, it's all going to start to boil. It's going to release steam, and that steam is what is going to increase the volume, create the leavening and the cream puff. So we need the eggs in there. All right, the eggs are really important. The leavening agent in this particular recipe is air and steam, so we need to make sure that we have enough in there.
Do you think this is pretty good?
Yeah, the batter should be smooth, but not runny. Okay, so we'll scrape it down one more time. We'll give it a little bit more of a mix, and we're really gonna look at the way the batter falls away from the paddle. All right, we want to watch how it falls away from the paddle. because that's going to tell us where we're at as far as consistency goes. It's perfect. You can see it already. Go ahead and we'll put the last little bit of egg in there. It's going to take all of them.
Yeah.
All right, a little bit stiff.
Stop it, drop it, scrape it down.
Okay. So that's good. That's good batter. Mm-hmm. All right. It's a good consistency. All right. So go ahead and put a little bit underneath so your paper doesn't blow around. Mm-hmm. And then we always found that, technically the classical way, the correct way to do this is going to be to go ahead and pipe it with a piping bag. But we're going to scoop it. All right, it's more efficient. It's going to be very consistent in size, and it just helps these guys out. They do pipe. We will pipe some of them if we need a smaller cream puff, or we will, if we need an eclair or something like that. So.
So I'll try to smooth out the portion scoop, and I'll try to scoop them and evenly distance them and keep them just as even as possible. So I'll take that, I'll scrape, and then I'll get the edges. And I'll just go ahead and repeat this until I have all of my puffs scooped.
Welcome back to Charlotte Technical College Baking and Pastry Program. We did a lot of great things within the program. This is just a small snippet of what these students are capable of on a daily basis, and just a very small example of what happens and every single day in this kitchen. Okay, so. Today we prepared brioche bread, and we're actually going to be making brioche every day this week. We were able to make some very nice cream puffs, and this is the first step in creating a cream puff and we always work several days ahead, so we will make the cream puffs oftentimes and freeze them and then pull them and fill them as we need them at a later date. This is a relatively large cream puff. Sometimes we're doing hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of small cream puffs. So we're always planning a little bit ahead, all right? And the cinnamon rolls were successful for the most part. It was the first time a lot of students have done it today, so we have a little bit of inconsistency in sizes. And that is one of those things that we are going to be working on throughout the rest of this year, is going to be mastering some of these techniques and making them consistent, so when they get out there into the workforce, they understand that consistency is one of the most important things that they can take with them out of this program. All right, and one of the things that is intriguing to me about baking is very scientific. For the most part, my career, for the most part, has been in hot foods. Being a chef, I always had a pastry chef that was working with me. So I kind of left that portion of the industry to the experts. when I came here to be a teacher, I had to start learning how to teach some of these kids, baking and pastry science. So that's one of the things that's been very challenging for me is I never really told them at the beginning that I was learning right along with them, because the majority of my time in the industry was spent in hot foods. But having said that, I've learned quite a bit over my teaching career, and it's become something that I'm really passionate about. I still am not the best baker out there, though, and I understand that. I think the students are coming in with zero knowledge of the industry, and they're leaving here with a very strong foundation of fundamentals when they leave. And if I can get that across to them to master the techniques and master the fundamentals, then that is, I feel relatively good about the fact that I've done my job to the best of my ability when it comes to that. So techniques, techniques, techniques. That's what I would stress to all the students. They don't necessarily want to hear it. It's not the most glamorous of glamorous parts of the industry. It's not necessarily Instagram, Facebook, Pinterest worthy, but it's important in the industry that they understand how to do these techniques and these fundamentals. Day one, we're 10 weeks into the school year, so day one, one of the first things I tell these guys when they come in here is learn how to measure your ingredients. 99.9% of the mistakes that are made in the kitchen are because measurements have been followed. Okay, math, very important that we are converting recipes and we understand the difference between grams and ounces and the metric, versus the standard, measuring system. I would say that would be the cause of 99.9% of the mistakes that are made in baking is math and measuring correctly. Okay, a good solid knowledge of bake shop ingredients is another thing that is very important. What is the difference between bread flour, cake flour, and all-purpose flour? What is the difference between baking soda and baking powder? Okay, so after we start to master some of the math and some of the measuring, we start to get into bake shop ingredients. And then the next thing that would be very, very important would be principles of baking. The difference between a whisk and a paddle and a dough hook. Okay? The difference between creaming method, muffin method, and biscuit method. Those are all very important, techniques that require maybe a little bit more research on the student's part. Maybe they don't quite get it the first time and that they need to spend a little bit more time researching it and finding out that information if they don't understand. Okay? So it's one of those things that we are constantly driving home the same basic principles from day to day to day. And it starts with a good attitude, it starts with hustle, professionalism, initiative, and if we can kind of mold that into our students, then we can start to build upon that. But it kind of starts with some of those very basic techniques and ideas. I think today was a good day, and hopefully you guys learned something and want to come take my baking and pastry course.